If you two are done with your little coffee break, perhaps you could get back to work. We have a full house tonight, in case you've forgotten," Victor barked. Sarah jumped, quickly gathering the plates she needed and hurried back to the dining room. Grace, however, simply nodded at Victor and returned to her task, her movements calm and steady. As she worked, Grace reflected on the stark contrast between the exquisite food being prepared and the toxic atmosphere in which it was created. She wondered what her son, Marcus, would think if he could witness this firsthand. The restaurant had been his father's dream, and as CEO, he was determined to honor that legacy. But Grace understood that true legacy wasn't solely about the food or accolades. It was about the people, the culture, and the values passed down through generations. She sighed softly as she placed another stack of Gleeman plates on the shelf. It was clear that much work lay ahead, not only in the dishwashing department but in the overall environment. Yet Grace was nothing if not patient. She believed that the most profound changes often began in the most unexpected places. As dinner service approached and the kitchen's energy escalated, Grace braced herself. She had a feeling tonight would test not only her ability to keep pace with the demands of the job, but also her determination to see this mission through, regardless of the challenges ahead. Armed with nothing more than a sponge, a kind heart, and unwavering resolve, she was ready to face whatever came her way. As days turned into weeks, Grace settled into her role at La Perfection, arriving each morning before dawn, her quiet presence a steadying force amidst the kitchen's whirlwind. However, as she became a fixture in the restaurant, she also became an increasing target for Victor's ire. At first, the comments were minor, a snide remark here, an eye roll there. "Keep up, Grandma," Victor would snap as he rushed past her station. Grace absorbed it all with a patient smile, her hands moving rhythmically from sink to drying rack. She noticed how the other staff winced at Victor's words, shooting her sympathetic glances when they thought she wasn't looking. One particularly busy evening, as the kitchen prepared for a high-profile event, Victor's temper flared. Grace was stacking a tray of freshly polished wine glasses when his voice sliced through the chaos. "What the hell is this?" he bellowed, storming over to her with a plate displaying a barely visible smudge near the rim. Calmly, Grace responded, "I apologize, Chef. I must have missed that one. I'll rewash it right away." But Victor wasn't interested in her apology. His face flushed with anger as he thrust the plate in front of her. "This is unacceptable. Do you have any idea what's at stake? We have food critics coming in tonight, and you're sending out dirty plates like we're some greasy spoon diner." The kitchen fell silent, all eyes on the confrontation. Grace stood her ground, her expression serene despite Victor's proximity and volume. "You're right, Chef. It won't happen again." "Is that all you have to say?" he sneered. "Maybe you're too old for this job after all. Maybe your eyes are going along with your ability to do simple tasks." A collective gasp echoed through the kitchen. Victor's level of personal attack was shocking, even for him. Yet Grace remained unruffled. "My eyes are just fine, Chef," she said, her voice steady. "I assure you I'm more than capable of doing my job. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have dishes to wash." Turning her back on him, she dismissed Victor, who stood there sputtering with rage. With one last glare, he stormed off, barking orders at the rest of the staff. As soon as he was out of earshot, Sarah approached Grace, her eyes wide with concern. "Are you okay?" "I've never seen him go off like that before," Sarah whispered. Grace offered a reassuring smile. "I'm fine, dear. It takes more than a few harsh words to rattle me." Sarah shook her head in disbelief. "I don't know how you handle it. If he spoke to me like that, I'd probably burst into tears." "Well," Grace replied, her eyes twinkling, "I've had plenty of practice dealing with difficult people. You'd be surprised at what a little patience and perspective can achieve." As the weeks passed, Victor's treatment of Grace escalated. He seemed to take her calmness as a personal challenge, going out of his way to belittle her work and make snide comments about her age. One day, while taking a lunch break in the small staff room, Grace overheard two line cooks chatting. "I can't believe how Chef Victor treats that poor woman," one whispered. "It's like he's trying to drive her away." "I know," the other replied, "but have you noticed? She never loses her cool. It's like water off a duck's back." Grace smiled to herself as she ate her sandwich, aware that every insult and jab was being carefully noted. She was building a case piece by piece, with Victor unwittingly providing all the evidence she needed. Despite the humiliation, Grace found unexpected allies among the staff. Sarah took it upon herself to act as a buffer during Victor's worst outbursts, often lingering near the dishwashing station during stressful moments to offer silent support. Other staff members also showed small acts of kindness. A young prep cook would help Grace carry heavy stacks of plates, while the pastry chef would slip her an extra dessert at the end of a long shift. Grace's quiet dignity in the face of Victor's abuse had sparked a sense of solidarity among the staff, fostering shared resistance against the toxic culture that had taken root in the kitchen. However, Victor remained oblivious to this shift. If anything, Grace's continued composure only seemed to infuriate him further. He began to single her out in front of the staff, using her as an example of what not to do. "Look at this, everyone," he would announce, holding up a pot that Grace had just washed. "This is what happens when you hire someone who belongs in a retirement home. See these water spots? This is unacceptable. Do I make myself clear?" The staff nodded silently, their eyes downcast, but Grace could sense the growing resentment among them. She understood that Victor's behavior was not only harming her, but also poisoning the entire work environment. One evening, as Grace was finishing her shift, Sarah approached her, wringing her hands nervously. "Grace," she said in a low voice, "I think you should know some of us have been talking. We're considering going to management, or even the owner. This can't continue the way Chef Victor treats you, or any of us. It's not right." Grace placed a comforting hand on Sarah's arm. "I appreciate your concern, dear, but please don't do anything rash. These things have a way of working themselves out." As Sarah walked away, still looking confused, Grace allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The pieces were falling into place, and soon it would be time for the next phase of her plan. As the weeks wore on, Chef Victor's behavior deteriorated significantly. His ego, already inflated, swelled further with each glowing review and prestigious award. La Perfection was basking in fame, and Victor was convinced he was the sole reason for its success. The kitchen, once a hub of culinary creativity and passion, had turned into a pressure cooker of fear and resentment. Staff turnover hit an all-time high, with new faces appearing almost weekly, only to vanish just as quickly, unable to withstand Victor's relentless criticism. One particularly tense evening, as the kitchen prepared for a high-profile charity event, Victor's behavior hit new lows. He paced the kitchen like a caged tiger, his sharp eyes searching for any excuse to unleash his temper. "You call that julienne?" he bellowed at a young prep cook, snatching the knife from her hands. "These look like they were cut by a blind monkey. Watch and learn." He demonstrated the proper technique with swift, precise movements, all the while berating the young cook with increasingly personal and cruel remarks. "How did you even get hired here? Did you lie on your resume, or did you sleep your way into this kitchen?" The cook's eyes filled with tears, but she remained silent, unable to move or speak. The rest of the staff kept their heads down, pretending to focus on their tasks, but Grace could sense the tension in their shoulders and the slight trembling of their hands. As Victor moved on to his next target, Grace caught Sarah's eye across the kitchen. The waitress looked pale, her usual cheer replaced by distress. Grace offered her a reassuring nod, but the toll of the environment was evident. Later that night, during the event, Grace overheard a conversation between two experienced line cooks. "I can't take much more of this," one whispered, his voice strained. "I've worked in tough kitchens before, but this is something else." The other cook nodded grimly. "I know what you mean. I've been searching for other jobs, but it's tough. Everyone knows that working under Chef Victor looks good on a resume, but at what cost?" Grace's heart ached as she listened. She had seen talented, passionate young chefs reduced to nervous wrecks, their love for cooking crushed under the weight of Victor's tyranny. It was a tragedy not only for those individuals but for the culinary world as a whole. As time went on, Victor's attacks on Grace grew more frequent and personal. It seemed her calm demeanor only infuriated him more. One day, as Grace polished a set of expensive crystal glasses, Victor approached her workstation, a sneer on his face. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "if it isn't our resident fossil. Tell me, Grandma, were these the kind of glasses you used back in the Stone Age?" Grace looked up at him, her expression serene. "Actually, Chef," she replied calmly, "in my experience, fine crystal like this has been around for centuries. It's a testament to the enduring nature of quality craftsmanship." Daniel's face darkened at her response. He snatched one of the glasses from her hands, holding it up to the light. "Quality craftsmanship? Let's see about that. Let's see about that." With a sudden violent motion, he smashed the glass against the edge of the sink. Shards of crystal exploded outward, scattering across the floor. The kitchen fell silent, all eyes on Victor and Grace. "Oops," Victor said coldly. "Looks like you missed a spot. Better clean that up." Without waiting for a response, he turned on his heel and strode away, leaving Grace to deal with the mess. As soon as he was out of sight, several staff members rushed over, their faces a mixture of shock and sympathy. "Are you all right?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "Did any of the glass cut you?" Grace shook her head, already reaching for a broom. "I'm fine, dear. Nothing wounded but my pride, and perhaps the restaurant's budget for glassware." As they cleaned up the broken crystal, Grace could hear whispers spreading through the kitchen. Victor had always been harsh, but this level of deliberate destruction was unprecedented. It was as if he dared someone to challenge him, to give him an excuse to unleash his full fury. As Sarah walked away, still looking uncertain, Grace allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The pieces were falling into place faster than she had anticipated. Soon, it would be time for the next phase of her plan. The anticipation in the air was palpable as La Perfection prepared for what was being hailed as the culinary event of the year. A group of international food critics and influential food bloggers were set to dine at the restaurant. Their combined opinions held the power to elevate La Perfection to new heights of fame or bring it crashing down. The pressure in the kitchen reached fever pitch. Victor, his ego inflated by the stakes of the evening, was in rare form. His voice echoed through the kitchen, a constant stream of criticism and threats. "If any of you screw this up," he snarled, pacing the line, "you'll be lucky to get a job flipping burgers after I'm done with you. Do I make myself clear?" The staff nodded silently, their faces masks of concentration and barely concealed fear. Grace watched from her station, her heart heavy. She could see the toll this environment was taking on everyone. Trembling hands, darting eyes, and the palpable sense of dread that hung over the kitchen like a storm cloud. As the first orders began to come in, Victor positioned himself at the pass, scrutinizing each dish with laser-like focus. Nothing escaped his critical eye: a sauce that was a shade too thin, a piece of fish slightly overcooked, a garnish not perfectly centered. "This is garbage," he bellowed, shoving a plate back at a terrified line cook. "Are you trying to sabotage this? Do it again and do it right this time." Grace kept her head down, focusing on her tasks, but she noticed the tension affecting the food. Dishes that usually flowed smoothly from station to station were being rushed. Mistakes were made and hastily covered up. The perfectionism that had once defined La Perfection was crumbling under the weight of fear and stress. As the evening wore on, it became clear that things were not going as planned. Dishes were being sent back from the dining room, something that almost never happened at La Perfection. Whispers from the servers grew more urgent, their faces pinched with worry as they relayed the critics' less than enthusiastic responses. Victor's face grew redder with each passing minute, his temper fraying at the edges. He began to micromanage every station, second-guessing even his most experienced chefs. The kitchen, usually a well-oiled machine, sputtered and stalled under his overbearing presence. It all came to a head with the final course,